bad listen. I'm like, I'm responding.
Nobody's in trouble yet? You guys in trouble? Uh-oh.
Oh my goodness.
Uh-oh.
We have to re-sing.
I had to re-sing. Let's see, this thing's still going good. All right. Well, we're talking about baptism, and I'm going to finish it up. I'm going to finish up the baptism, but I didn't realize, or I forgot that I had not taught you the words, right? And the words are really, really important. So I gave you the definition. That's the Strong's 907. I didn't write it in Greek. I could have. But baptizo, means to submerge. To submerge. Submerge. And therefore, in Greek, it means to immerse. It comes literally from the word to dip under. And you compare that, the word, for example, anixomai, which means to sprinkle. What I think is important is to compare, like, for example, what we have with baptism and mikvah. And mikvah, that's what we're looking at, is the mikvah, because, all right, we don't necessarily, I don't know why we don't like to use Jewish words. We use Greek words. Ha! Wonder why. It's in Greek, right? But for some reason we don't like to use the Hebrew words. And so most people have never heard of mikvah. If you've been in this class, you've heard mikvah a lot. But the mikvah is where we get baptism from. When I was a kid, I was like, this baptism thing must be a brand new thing. No, they've been doing baptism, mikvah, from the very beginning of the Torah, pretty much. From the beginning when Moses got the law. So, mikvah and baptizo are the same, which is really interesting because we got that thing about Lydia today, the readings. And also, we're going to eventually get back to, we'll get to 5 in John, promise. We get to chapter 5, we see the healing, right, in the pool at Bethesda, which is the Shaloi, the pool of Shaloi. Anyway, so baptizo means to submerge. Mikvah, we've already started looking at it, and there's questions, right? So these are both submersions in water. Now, why is that important? I told you before, Christianity looks like a mysterion. What do mysterions do? Almost every mysterion baptized. What did they baptize in? Some mysterions baptized in blood. Not super common, but they did. The most common thing to baptize in was water. Places where they didn't tend to baptize in water were like, what did the Greeks and Romans do with water? They bathed. Yeah, they got the baths. Anybody been to the baths? Pompeii, Rome, right? They got the baths because cleanliness was good. People didn't want to stink. In cultures that don't tend to bathe, you see a lot of this. You see baptism with water. Mikvah. God said at least get in the water once a month. Oh, yuck, right? Just saying. So, and we do know that about certain cultures, right? Hebrew culture is not known for bathing, but it's known for mikvah. There are a lot of cultures, especially the Middle East. Why? Because how much water? That's the question. I've told you this before. Why did we get to sprinkling and dipping and all this other stuff? How much? How much water's, well, we already read in the mikvah, we're going to get more of that, but it's what, 40 of whatever those amounts are that are, we've read it, we're going to get more into that. How much water? 40. How? In baptizo, although the word means to immerse, or submerge, what did they say in the early church? Well, the most important thing was the baptism, right? So they said, well, it doesn't matter how much water, and the water depth, and so what? How do you do it, and what? What water? Right? the Jordan River is okay. Do you think the Nile River passes? I don't know. You need to ask a rabbi, literally. You ask a rabbi, hey, is this water okay? It's supposed to be rainwater, but certain rivers can be used, and Jordan River is one of them. John was immersing in the Jordan River. How much and how in the mikveh, and we saw already, well, we're going to see more because I've got some information on the modern mikveh. I want to get there today. But in the, you have to take off everything. Totally naked. No bandages. No coverings at all. No jewelry. No rings. Everything has to be exposed to the water. And everything must be immersed. So the mikveh lady or the mikveh man, which by the way is John, right? No one, in baptism, if you immerse people in baptism, usually what do? You say the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, and you dip people under water. Someone dips you. That's not the way the mikveh works. That's not the way John did, I guarantee you. What happened is you self-dip. This is self. Why? Because if someone's touching you, what happens?
There's no water.
Yeah. So no one can dip you. The mikveh lady or the mikveh man or John, when you went under the water, your hair floats. Women know this, guys don't, because guys usually don't have long hair. But if you're long hair, your hair floats. So the mikveh lady takes a stick and pushes your hair under the water to make sure it's all submerged. The mikveh lady or mikveh guy also inspects to make sure, literally inspects you to make sure there's no bandages, no jewelry, no stuff. You didn't forget to take off a plaster, right? Because this is required. Because self, but how much? All. We know the answers to this because we see it all the time. Now, if you're Orthodox, they're going to make you naked. And by the way, they're supposed to. So when they put a baby underwater in the Orthodox Church, they're supposed to. Startle reflex makes the child take a breath and close their mouth and don't breathe, right? They're supposed to let the baby go under the water for just a moment and then re-grab it. Because the Orthodox Church, guess what, is the closest to early Christianity, and that's probably how they did it. This is interesting stuff. I mean, it's really kind of, I would say, outside of our normal understanding of things, but it's, if you were Jewish coming into Teen Hodos, guess what you would know, right? And if you're Greek Mysterion coming into Teen Hodos, guess what you know? We believe their baptism practices were not rigid like the Jewish traditions are, but still, if you don't do it right, well, we just had that case, right? You know what I'm talking about? The Catholic priest who instead of saying, I baptize you, said, we baptize you. And the Catholic Church, the Pope said, you can't say we. It's not a we. It's an I. Now most of us would say, what? What's the big deal with that? Right?
Wouldn't it be they?
No, it's the article that I read said since the priest is like acting on behalf of Christ, he has to say I.
Yes, precisely. Precisely. However, does anybody see in the early days of Christianity that would be like, you're kidding me, right? I mean, Paul, Silas, all of it, they'd say, you're kidding me, because did the words matter? No, what matters is the baptism, the immersion matters. It doesn't say what words to say. It says that we baptize you in the name of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, but it doesn't say what language to use. I mean, if it's not in Greek, if it's not in Latin, if it's not in English, wait, English. English didn't even exist at the time. So which language, right? So what words matter? They don't matter. Now, I do want to tell you this. This is really important. I'm going to skewer the modern stupidity.
Now, I want to chase a rabbit here for a second
Okay,
about the words not mattering. Because most mainline Christian churches recognize baptism from another church as long as it was done in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And so there are a handful of baptisms that we don't recognize. The Mormons, for example, because they don't baptize in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So thus the words do matter.
however, when you say, you just said it, if I say, okay, you don't have to say it, it has to be done in,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So it doesn't matter which words I use when I do it, if I don't use any words when I do it, if I think. Now this is modern. In the ancient world they say, that's impossible. You can't think. You can only say, right?
Right.
But if I'm thinking, and by the way, remember the mikvah? Who does it? Self. So when you are baptized, it's not the person saying it to you or above you or when they're doing it. What matters?
Who's doing the work? God is doing the work.
Well, God's doing the work, but who's doing the words?
Well, the office of the holy ministry is.
Yeah, but in a mikvah, if we're doing a real mikvah, it would be you. Now, we would say an infant can't do that, but guess what? Are infants given mikvah? We do mikvah or baptism for infants because it's become a natural thing in our church. But it's not what the Teen Hodos did, I guarantee you. Is there any infant baptism in the New Testament? We don't know. We presume because it says, and your household. But why do you, well, this is getting really down a deep track. But the thing is that I'm just saying the words are supposed to be your words. Now, what do we say in our Book of Concord about baptism? It requires water and word. Okay? The water and word, when does the word actually happen? If let's say I take a whole bunch of infants and I spray them down with water and I say, I baptize you in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, does it stick? How do we know it's stuck, according to Lutheranism?
Because God is the doer and God doesn't make mistakes.
No, that's not how we know it's stuck. What is the requirement? If I just baptize you, that's not sufficient. What do we say is required to become, basically to, if a child dies, yes, they go to God, but what do we say is the final thing that seals it? Confirmation. Confirmation is when you personally accept what was done at your baptism.
And you proclaim it, you profess it.
You proclaim it and profess it. Remember, we just talked about that, right? The pastor did. Now, that's not to say that baptism didn't work for the child, right? But the point is that if you want to continue in the communion of the church as a full member, you must be confirmed. Now, in the ancient world, when did they do confirmation? We know this for an absolute fact. They did it before baptism. In the modern era,
And then they were baptized on Easter.
they were baptized generally Easter. In the modern world, we do infant baptism. Why do we do infant baptism? I'll give you that. That comes back to the Hebrew idea of naming the child and the boys being circumcised on, what, the 8th day or whatever, 7th day. Anyway, circumcision, Christianity took on this thing. There are a lot of churches that are completely legitimate churches. Non-creedal churches do not baptize infants. Orthodox do, Lutherans, Catholics,
That's why
Anglicans.
confirmation is such a critical process.
What's that?
Confirmation is a critical process
Co-
because
yeah.
for those that have been infant baptized, because they must have an opportunity to speak for themselves.
A lot of people think, I'll just get my baby baptized and they don't really,
They don't
the
do
child in
anything
the faith
else.
or anything. Yeah, it's, if you can reject the baptism, it's not a get in kind of free card.
Yeah.
I've heard of like nurses that baptize, or doctors that baptize infants, you know, emergency baptism. So can anybody baptize?
Yes.
Yes.
It's.
Yes.
in all
However,
conditions.
Okay.
In the case of an emergency.
How many of you believe that if a child is not baptized, they go to hell? Wait, come on! Then why? We believe, okay, water and word, right? We believe as people, even though the Book of Concord tells you that those babies that aren't baptized are going to hell, nobody believes that. It's okay. It's okay. Nobody believes that, even though that's what we confess. Okay? That's all right. The thing is that, I've told you before, when do the Hebrews believe that a child becomes responsible for their sin?
Pubic hair.
Well, a boy at 13 and a girl at 12 and pubic hair. They believe that the identifier of your responsibility, and by the way, it goes back to the Old Testament in Genesis. What did God do when he sent Adam and Eve off? It says that he sacrificed an animal and he used the hair as a covering. That is euphemistic, and if you ever look at it in Hebrew, and I don't know if I've taught it in Hebrew before, that literally means that God put pubic hair on human beings. And it's euphemistic. Hebrew is super euphemistic, Greek is not. Guess where we got ours? From the Greek, of course, because that's the way we interpret the words, but it's really ambiguous in the Hebrew. And if you talk to your rabbi will tell you that that's what it means. We don't talk about that because we, you know, you guys are adults. You know, this is like 6th grade Sunday school, you know, and they should probably tell them in 6th grade Sunday school too, because they you know, they should know. But the thing is that this is the way the world is, right? Now, we do not accept that. Some churches do. Baptist churches believe that there is an age of accountability. They just say, we don't know when. Well, the Jewish people say, we know when, right? I think the Baptists don't because they don't want to talk about pubic hair. But, you know, that's just the way the world is, right? The Victorian era really did a lot of interesting things for religious ideas and theology. So just saying. But anyway, in this class we can talk about these things because it's the truth and the way that it is. So, in any case, I want to show you something. You know, this whole thing about pronouns, people have gotten all this pronoun stuff, you know, and they want different pronouns. Look at the Greek, okay? If you look at this, okay, the verbs are gendered. Verbs and nouns are gendered. Human beings and animals are sexed. They have sex. They are sexed. Male and female. There are no others, male and female. But you look at this. This is a verb and a verb tense that is second person. You. Let's see. You. Other example. Masculine singular. Oh, Elias is masculine singular. Christ is masculine singular. Masculine singular. The article is masculine single article. It's an article. It has a gender. It is masculine singular. This is second person singular. This is a nominative masculine singular. What happens if I try to translate documents and I don't understand what the tenses are, the genders of the verbs and the nouns? What will happen?
You get a woke Bible?
No, you don't get anything. Because if you don't know this is a you, a second person, right? And if you don't know it's a he or a she or an it, you'll be reading a sentence and it's an it. Well, what does an it mean? An it doesn't mean a human being, right? An it can't be a human being. An it is a thing. So if I'm trying to translate and I come across an it, and the verb is for a masculine singular verb, what does that mean? It means it is not, it can't be an it. It's got to be a national singular. It's got to be one of these, right? So if I can't translate a language, what does that mean?
Can't understand it.
I can't understand it. This whole thing about pronouns, English does not routinely, it does not have gendered nouns generally. There are only one gendered noun or two gendered nouns, and we don't use them anymore. Ships were gendered. They were female. That comes from Anglo-Saxon. Anglo-Saxon does have gendered nouns. Okay? And hurricanes used to be female, but they made them all male now. Right? Now you can do that. You can change your language because our language isn't dependent on gender in the nouns, and we don't change the gender of the verbs, right? So to translate English isn't very difficult. It's all contextual, right? You notice Greek isn't contextual the same way. It's different contextual. In English, it's the order, right? We always have the subject, the object, the predicate, right? All that stuff, right? That's the way we do English. In Greek, you don't have to do that because you can mix stuff around because you indicate its position, you know, whether it's dative, or accusative, or nominative, the different cases. I mean, we know that, right? Anyway, I'm just saying that if you can't have the proper gender to the noun or verb, you cannot translate documents. Now that's interesting, isn't it? So if you wonder why people are trying to screw up English and mess up English with really funny stuff, that's why. Because in communism, if I destroy the language, remember George Orwell? Anybody read 1984?
It wasn't supposed
Remember
to be
that?
like a how-to manual for society, but that's kind of what's happening.
It's become a how-to manual, hasn't it?
It was supposed to be fiction.
Yeah, I know.
It's not,
It's getting
but it's
really
coming
scary.
through.
And remember, the government, they said they got rid of the Disinformation Bureau.
Yeah.
It-
Oh,
that-
No, they just paused it.
Well, in the government, I worked for the government for 24 years, actually longer than that. When something goes away, it's gone covert. That's what happens in the government. The office of, the NASP office, NASP, the supersonic aircraft, the whatever, that, you know, that aircraft was a covert office, was an overt office for years and years and years and years. I knew the guys who run it. 2 guys ran it, a lieutenant or a captain and a GS guy. And I knew him, Len Puller, he's a great guy. Anyway, they were running that office, and guess what? One day, the office went away. I don't know where the programs are, but they're still talking about it during the SCTP, the Society of Experimental Test Pilots. Guess what? It's still going on. It's just going on underground. It's covert. It went covert. That's what happens. Okay? Just so you know, when things, you can see it in the developmental technology world, but the same thing happens. So the Office of Disinformation, it was there before, it's there now. It's working. And you're going to get an FBI warning on your fake book when you say something they don't like.
You already do
That happens to me all the time. And Al, dude, Al, we get beat up all the time. I just try to get people a little excited about the world, but yeah.
But they check things that are true. And then you're like,
that. And then they weave up all this stuff that's false.
Did you notice that? You notice that? I mean, wait, they had in a congressional thing, they asked a lady, they said, can men get abortions?
She was an OBGYN.
Pregnant in.
It was would you go to an OBGYN that thinks that men can be pregnant and get abortions? I was like, dude, I'd run. Ladies, run. If you find one, run. They can't define woman. They got a problem. And we got a Supreme Court
I was going to
justice
say,
that
too
can't
bad we
define
can't
woman.
run away from the Supreme Court justice that does
Yeah.
that.
Oh, my goodness gracious. Yep. All right. Anyway, I want to finish up this stuff. Sorry. This is the mikvah from, and this is Shabbat. So this is the Mishnah and Talmud. I know I'm boring you with the Mishnah and Talmud, but I want you to see this. Number one, how many of you often get to see Hebrew? How many of you read the Mishnah and Talmud? Probably not. So I'm giving you a little taste. The taste may be too much. You may want to spit it out of your mouth, but it's okay. I just want you to have a little taste of this because this is where a lot of my information comes from, and I just got this really wonderful source. And this is, very pertinent to what we're talking about. So anyway, rather reason statement is accordance with the opinion. He said, in the case of beets that are once squeezed and place their juice in a ritual bath, the juice invalidates the ritual bath and causes a change of appearance. Any liquid that causes the water of a ritual bath to change color invalidates the ritual bath. Aren't these typically not designated for squeezing? Okay.
If you boil them, you
Yeah. But
But
who came
I
up with
don't
this question that they
squeeze.
had to answer these?
that's silly.
What was the situation that they felt they had to issue this statement?
Many times we,
Sunburn look.
Really,
well, we don't, it's like Supreme Court arguments, right? Many times we don't get the full picture of what happened that resulted in a judge's decree. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. And sometimes you're required by law to keep it. But yeah, isn't this interesting? And remember I told you about mikvah, right? Mikvah? So the early church would have said, is it okay to have squeezed beets in your water? Well, the early church at first would have said, nah, because we follow the mikvah. But what did they quickly move to? Sure, why not? Now, can you use soup? I don't know if you can use soup. It's obviously not with a mikvah, but maybe for baptism. Let's see. Laws of mikvah are many. There is a law of drawn water. How much disqualifies the mikvah, and how is it disqualified in what vessel? And the water is drawn water, as one drew it with a vessel. Remember, the water has to be either a river water, natural water. It has to be from rainwater. So if it's drawn, what's drawn mean? From a well. Yes, sir.
Just curious, what water in that time period wouldn't have been rainwater?
Well water.
Okay.
Or rivers that were not legal. Like, we know the Jordan was legal, but why did they make the Jordan River legal?
It was there.
I think, wasn't it like naturally flowing water or something like that?
Yes, certain naturally flowing rivers, but the rabbis have to approve it. And I believe that they have to be constantly flowing. So rivers that, for example, like the Rio Grande that goes and comes, or the Arkansas River, right? It goes and comes and comes and goes. Is that a natural river? Ask the rabbi. I don't know. The rabbis say you can use this. And that if there's beets in the water, I don't know.
The Jordan probably has worse than that.
All seas are equivalent to a ritual bath. And the gathering of the waters he called the seas. The words of the rabbi says the great sea is equivalent to a ritual bath, for it says seas only because there are many kinds of seas. So the seas. So you happen to live near a sea, you can use it. Now, okay, what makes a sea? There's a great question. What makes it a sea? An inland sea. Can you use, what's that in Utah? Salt Lake, right? I don't know. The Dead Sea. The Dead Sea, I don't know. Yeah.
You hard to immerse in the Dead Sea.
Yeah.
You really have to pull to push somebody down.
Yeah, you gotta keep popping back up.
If 2 boxes were before him and each one has 50 C, remember it's 40 C is required, and 1 C if he fell into one of them, was not known into which one. If he wants to lift any of them, he may do so. If you lift half of this one and half of the similar, if there were 2 gallons of water, one containing 20 C, and 3 log of drawn water fell into one, it's not known which he wants to lift. Is the water collection, so can you use the mikvah, right? So if you have stuff going into the mikvah water, right? But so you still have 40 say, but it's got drawn water and other water. And guess what they do? What do you think they do? As long as the rainfall water, you can mix it with the drawn water. And that's what the modern mikvah, we'll get modern mikvah. Let's see. This is just a thing, let the water below the sky be gathered in one area that dry land may appear. Well, it was, that's a mikvah text. Let's see, I want to get through all of these. Let me get to the modern mikvah. Seas equivalent to mikvah. Seas are equivalent, you can use a sea, but not all rivers. The dough that was leavened, okay, And dough that was leavened with a truma. This is interesting. Truma is the sacrifice. So dough that was leavened with a truma, that's a sacrifice, leavening agent, is forbidden to those whom truma is forbidden, even if the ratio between the sacred and unsacred. The proportion that dough is intermingled with non-sacred dough, it leavens only according to the calculation percentage of the original leavening agent. Interesting, right? Why is truma important with the mikvah?
You couldn't do the truma unless you had the
You could not eat from truma. And by the way, you're not supposed to take confirmation until you are baptized. We do the same thing. Truma, the Thanksgiving sacrifice, right? The Thanksgiving feast. Very.
So you were saying they have to basically be clean before they could partake?
Have to be.
And then earlier we talked in terms of like if you had sores or other things that you weren't clean. So the mikveh would also be a way to verify full body cleanliness.
We will probably see this. Jesus points this out often. Okay, if you're a Pharisaic guy and you're supposed to do the mikveh after every time you have sex or have a seminal, thing, women have to do it right after the menstrual cycle, 7 days after the menstrual cycle. You're required. There are other times the requirements for the mikveh. So as a Pharisee, you might say, I'm not having sex, so that you don't have to expose yourself to somebody who might see that you have sores. So,
And celibacy?
well, claims to celibacy.
Yes.
The thing is that, okay, you know the arguments, right? Remember, these are slave-based cultures, so you see this a lot in slave-based cultures. Why do you think 2/3 of the slaves in Rome, or Roman and in Greece, were women? Number one, it's easier to handle them, and number two, because they're sex slaves, basically, and concubinage. Look, I told you over and over again, when I was a kid, they talked about concubines. Remember about concubines? Well, what's a concubine? A concubine is a slave with the marital rights. Whoa! That means a slave who has been either forced or has sex with the master. It does not have marriage rights. And in Jewish thought, right, you can't be married to a non-Jewish person. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff, list of people you can't be married to. It has to be another Jewish person. So guess what? If you're having sex with a slave, concubinal marriage, it's not a legal marriage, right? So you could, the Talmud don't talk about it, but you sure get smushy about stuff like that, right? But we don't like to talk about that. I know it's adult subjects. These are real. You see it all the time in the Bible. Let's see. About the reason water purifies everything impure. This is really good. I would think on the side of simple understanding that it is in order that a man see himself with the immersion as if he is created at that time. Just like the whole world was water before man was upon it, as is written. And the Spirit of God floated upon the face of the waters. And through this comparison, he placed upon his heart that just like he is renewed in his body, he renews his actions for the good. So he takes it, the Talmud and the Mishnah take it all the way back to Genesis. And Rav says, in the case of a barrel full of drawn water that fell into the Mediterranean Sea, concerning one who immerses there, in the spot where the water fell, the immersion did not affect his purification, because we are concerned that 3 log of drawn water should not be collected in one place. It just invalidated the whole Mediterranean Sea because some water fell into it. Okay, now what about fishes? Okay, just saying. Let's see. To man, a beverage produced from grape residue soaked in water until it's fermented may not be purchased with the second time money to be drunk in Jerusalem, because it is not wine. And if 3 alive that fall into a ritual bath, it's a like status that have drawn water, and it invalidates the ritual bath. Once it's fermented, it is wine, and therefore may be purchased. Okay, second tithe money. All right. Tithe money. I want you to know this. What do you buy with the tithe? You give it to the church? You give it to the temple? The Thanksgiving sacrifice is the tithe. You bring the tithe. Why did they let them? Remember, they had drunkenness. Well, what did they allow them to do really early is if you didn't live in Jerusalem, you had to go to Jerusalem for the festivals and with your tithe, right? So it was difficult for you to carry it. So what did they let you do? You could convert it into proto-money. There is no money in the Old Testament. There is no money in the Old Testament. Money was invented in 600 BC in Lydia. There is no money. There is proto-money. They could turn it into proto-money and carry it to the temple. Therefore, the money changers? No, there were no money changers. But they would convert your proto-money into food and beverage. You also could carry your own. So with your money, you could buy wine, you could buy whiskey. You could buy wine, you could buy, stuff to eat and drink. And therefore, do the Thanksgiving sacrifice. How many other sacrifices could you do this with? We don't know. But we know in Jesus' time, that the Levites raised lambs in Bethlehem. The only time there are lambs in Bethlehem is during the Passover. Therefore, Jesus was born during Passover because there were shepherds, Levite. We know from the Talmud they were Levite shepherds abiding their flocks by night in Bethlehem. Why do you think they were there at night? No, because there was no room for them in the inn. There was no room for the sheep because the lambs, they had so many lambs that if you have a bunch of lambs and you don't have enough lamb places to put the sheepfolds, what do you got to do?
Gotta guard them all day.
Yeah, they didn't have collies. They needed collies, but they didn't have collies, okay? So they had the doggies, so the people had to do it. That's why they were there at night. So, anyway, we know in Jesus' time that they brought, well, even if you brought your lamb, it's got a blemish. But we'll sell you one, right? We'll give you a deal. So we knew they took their money to buy the Passover lamb at Jerusalem because that's why there were lambs in, and we know it from the Talmud too. Anyway, let's see. This stuff is so deep, isn't it? I mean, just these little things culturally. God said, let there be an expanse in the midst of water that may be separate water from water. God made the expanse, etc. Sky, this is just relating to water and to the Talmud. Coming here, a barita, that's a saying, a accepted saying of statement. They said to the rabbi, your foreign influence is flawed, as we see in today's example. And just as with regard to a ritual bath, which elevates the impure from their ritual impurity, when they immerse, but does not save the pure from becoming impure if they come into contact with impurity after immersion. So too with regard to a person who does not elevate the impure from their impurity. So you could have your mikvah bath, right? And if a lizard runs across your foot, or you step, right? You step in a little bit of manure. You got to do it all again. It invalidated. Boy, this is tough stuff, right? Aren't you glad your baptism wasn't quite the same? At this point, several, not all, the 18 decrees were enumerated. Gemara asks, and what is the other decree? The Gemara answers, as we learned in the Mishnah, in Taktet Mikvah, one who places vessels under the drain pipe in order to collect rainwater, the water collected in the vessels is considered drawn water. So what you have to do is you have to let the water flow into the mikvah bath naturally. It can't be collected water. Boy, this makes it difficult, right? 18 things they decided, and the 18 were majority, and the 18 they were divided. The following they decided about Gentiles' bread, and about their cheeses, about their oil, and about their daughters, and about their semen, and about their urine, and about the rules of a person with an emission, and the rules of the land of Gentiles. We say the following make heave unusable. One who eats food impure from the first degree, and one who eats Okay, why is this important?
What is heat?
Something that falls into if it falls into something. So in the case of a ritual bath, if like something, a dead mouse on the side falls, that's heat. If other
Heat.
water falls in, what's that?
Heat.
Yeah, beat.
That's heat. If something like a rock or a stone falls in, that's a heat. You know, some things it doesn't matter because if they fall in, they don't, you know, they may increase the level, but they don't affect the water. Yes, sir. Oh, I thought you had a question. Anyway, the reason the Gentiles are important is because guess what? In the diaspora, where were they living? Among the Gentiles, right? And so this is a huge question, very important question for them. Let's see, Mishnah Torah, immersion pools. It's obviously clear the laws concerning defilements and impurities are biblical decrees and not things which the human mind can determine. They're classified as divine statutes. So to immersion as a means of ridding oneself of defilement is included among the divine statutes. Defilement is not mud or filth to be removed with water, but it is a matter of biblical decree. It depends on the heart's intent. Heart's intent. According to the sages have declared, if a man immersed himself without a definite purpose in view. Now this is interesting, right? It goes right back to what we talked about baptism, right? An infant may not have a definite purpose in view because they can't think, right? But through confirmation, they gain the attribute.
And their parents are standing in.
And their parents stand for them, saying, we will train and teach them in the Word. Exactly. I think this is really interesting because in reality, although we don't do mikvah, we do baptism, right? But the differences are not quite moot. It's the method that's moot, kind of to a degree, but the meaning is really similar. And we're going to see that in the modern mikvah too. There are 6 degrees of mikvah, each superior to the other. The water of pools smaller than 40 c, if an unclean person drank of it, and then a clean person drank of it, he becomes unclean. If an unclean person drank of it and drew water from a clean vessel, the vessel becomes unclean. If an unclean person drank of it and then a loaf of teruma, a loaf of bread that is for the sacrifice, has been sacrificed, fell in, if he washes his hands in it, it becomes unclean. Man. Who's watching this stuff? Let's see. We have stated dyer's water disables a mikvah by 3 log, but not by a change of color. The beach, now they're talking about dyer's water. What's dyer's water? That's water that has for dyeing something. So even if it doesn't change the color, it's still, just as Shema says, because the souring makes it sour, so he says because it is visibly drawn. So it disables a mikvah by 3 log, but not by a change of color.
Probably where the beet came in.
Exactly.
Dyer's water.
Yeah.
Maybe they use beets to dye.
I bet they did.
They did.
Is any of this come from God? I mean, did they make this all up?
Well, this is, they were taking some of it is biblical, right? Some of the quotes are biblical, but they're taking the quotes from the Bible, from the Torah, and then they're taking Mishnah, from the Mishnah, and then they're combining, and they're also making their own arguments, or their own interpretation to make a ruling.
Just a hindsight technology thing. This is a culture that has no concept of bacteria or disease, but these things they've put in place is pretty much, this is the best way they can guarantee sterile water for people to bathe in, even though they don't know why they're making it so sterile, basically for that functionally anyway.
Yeah, well, that's a great point, and I think it's pretty good, but I think the point we've made before, like, but can it ever be sterile water or pure water, right? No, it can't be. You might have enough, but is it okay? Well, I don't know. Did somebody step on, like, little manure or, a gecko get in it? I mean, are you guarding it for geckos? You're sitting there with a machine gun? Or the rit for a rat, right? And he shoots the rat in, what's that movie? that was John Wayne in that movie. He gives a rat for a rat. So he's sitting there waiting for the rat. Anyway, so you're going to kill the geckos before they get in. What's that? Sorry. The change in name which the item does not revert to its original state really considered a change. Here's a beautiful Greek philosophical question. And is a change in name in which the item does not revert to its original state really considered a change? But there is the case of a water duct where it was initially called a log, a tetzita, and now is called a duct. And it is taught in a barita, a duct that one hired out and average attached to the ground for a building invalidates a ritual bath. So if it's called a log, it invalidates it. Or a duct, it invalidates it. If it's called a log, it doesn't invalidate it.
You know what,
Okay.
this is
rose
where you sit
playing
and you
today.
look at this and you say, these people need a life.
Yes.
There's something to do.
Well, what do you think Jesus said, right?
Pretty much that.
Yeah.
Mishnah. He who weaves 3 threads to start one weave is liable, but the sages say whether at the beginning and end its measure is 2 threads. You say, why is this important? Well, this is just another one of the rulings from the Mishnah that they use in the argument, which should be further here. This is, okay, in Genesis, right? This is ruling for the mikvah. Here's Baridbar, Rabbah. That's another Talmud. The seers, the prophets, were the ones who said the double letters, which are the letters that have different form when they appear at the end of the word. The doubling, this is all in argument about changing the word, right? If it's a log, it's one thing. If it's a duct, it's another. It's very interesting. These are all arguments to support that. Moses said, go to the people and warn them to stay pure today and tomorrow. Let them wash their clothes. Mikvah does not say about washing clothes. Further objection. There was an incident involving a Yeo water trough in Jerusalem, which had a hole connected to a ritual bath. And all the ritual purification in Jerusalem were performed in it. People immersed their utensils in this trough. At Beit Shammah sent messengers, they widened the opening of the water trough, as in the opinion of Beit Shammah, the hole was not large enough for the trough to be considered connected to the adjacent ritual bath. Maybe that's where the beats came from, right? Like, oh my, they're washing their vessels in the water trough that feeds to the thing.
Just another observation, there's no requirement for wearing clean clothing.
No.
So after you've taken your mikvah and gotten all purified, you go put your dirty clothes back on and go to the temple.
And how many pairs of clothes did you have?
One.
One, yeah. You know, I was just reading a thing about Victorian England. You know, the average Victorian person, if they were lucky, women had 2 dresses. The really wealthy may have had 4 dresses. I mean, princes, of course, had lots of dresses. But can you ladies imagine wearing the same thing over and over and over again? Guys don't care. They even smell themselves. But, you know, whatever. He who takes foodstuffs less than a measure in a vessel is not liable, even the vessel, since the vessel is accessory to him. For a living person on a fire, he is not liable even for the buyer, since the vessel is an accessory to him. For a dead person on fire, he is liable. And so the volume of an olive from a dead person, or the volume of an olive from a carcass, or a lintel from the crawling animal, one is liable.
So if you're dead, you're liable?
Well, it says an olive. So the volume of an olive from a carcass. So how much, in other words, how much makes you impure, right? Yeah. There exists a burrito which says idols are like menstruating women. Its appearances are like a menstruating woman. And also there exists a burrito which says idols are like a menstruating woman, etc., etc. Crawling animals. The one who says idols are like menstruating, whatever, are like, anyway, this is where they're making arguments about, you know, why the menstruation. But also, the most funniest part in the whole Bible is when Rachel's sitting on the idols and says she's menstruating. That is just funny. That is just so funny. All right. You live the way Israel shall wash his clothes and bathe his flesh for 40 seas of water, and afterwards to be in the camp. Yeah. Did you hear anything about the ancient mikvah, about washing clothing? No, not a word. But yet it's right there from Leviticus. Isn't that interesting? All right.
Do they have anything about the number of people that can go through this water? You know, they used to just joke about throwing out the baby with the bathwater.
Well, you know what? I bet they did some degree of quality check, but I suspect since every person there, okay, so a guy has not been in the water, let's say 30 days, right? And he gets in the water, and all of a sudden all these oils are coming up from his hair, and it's from his body, and whatever else, and he's dirty, right? And yeah, you know, hopefully there's some flow going on there, right? But yeah, and after a while you're like, well, probably you didn't care, but yeah, we would care, right?
The old adage, nothing gets clean without something else getting dirty, so.
Ew.
How they ever get
And,
their feet clean, how they ever get their feet
well, remember,
clean.
well,
I only had foot washing, but still.
and they did with oil, right? Yeah, remember the ancient Egyptians? I told you how they loved to do themselves. They had those oil things that were oil they put on their heads. So the oil dripped down into their hair and on their faces. Oh, you know, just the thought of it just makes my skin crawl, you know? We wash too much. There are cultures that need to wash more. In the ancient world, they couldn't hardly wash at all. So, well, that's why the Greeks, I want to be Greek or Roman, because at least you go to the baths, right? But still, in the baths, you know how they wash.
Wait, they put oil or whatever on themselves and then they took the spudule and scraped it off. And they did like, was it 3 different pools or is it a warm and a cold?
Yeah, they like to do that. But yeah, they put oil on their body and then scraped it off. Yeah, we had lye, and that makes it more better. Anyway, the modern mikvah. Let's look at the modern mikvah, okay? This, by the way, this information comes from a woman who's an expert in Judaism. A woman can't be a rabbi. She's an Orthodox, and so she has some really good information because in the modern era, men will do the mikvah, even in the modern era. But in Orthodox Judaism, who do you think does the mikvah the most? Women.
They have to.
Well, yeah, they
They have to after their menstrual cycle.
because it's obvious, right? Where a man, it may not be quite as obvious. Although for an Orthodox guy who has sex with his wife say, hey, you're supposed to go to the mikvah. You know, you might slap him around with it, but anyway. But they don't have to worry because why do you do the mikvah? To read teruma.
Yeah,
There ain't no teruma no more. You don't care, right? Anyway, to the uninitiated, a modern-day mikvah looks like a miniature swimming pool, religion-rich and deco, etc., etc. Okay, we looked at the ancient mikvah. This is the modern mikvah. Okay, primary place in Jewish life and law. The mikvah offers the individual. Look at this. This is really important. The mikvah offers the individual, the community, and the nation the remarkable gift of purity and holiness. No other religion, establishment, structure, or rite can affect Jew in this. The mikvah offers the individual, community, and the nation the gift of purity and holiness. This is the means that they can do it on an essential level. I told you, women in Judaistic thought, Judaic thought, are the highest peak of creation. I think it's very interesting that the mikveh has fallen on the shoulders of the women in modern Judaistic thought, because they're the ones running the show. And this is, okay, can you sacrifice? Nope. You can pray, you can study, you can do all those good rabbinical things, but do they really help you? I mean, we would argue, yes, they do, but from a concrete standpoint, how do you prove your purity and holiness? Right? The mikveh is a method of that, and it's important. Community, a whole 9 yards. Let's see, condensed construction, of course, with numerous and complex specifications. All right, here we go. This is the modern view from what we just read, all that stuff. So this is what the rabbis say. The world's natural bodies of water, its oceans, rivers, wells, and spring-fed lakes are mikvahs in their most primal form. Remember that came from Genesis. They contain waters of divine source, and thus tradition teaches the power to purify. Created even before the earth took shape, etc., etc. They pose difficulties as well. They are not necessarily kosher for immersion. A competent rabbi must be consulted. If you did this, that's why I said, talk to a rabbi. If you want to mikvah, you've got to talk to him, because the Arkansas River may not be an approved source. These waters may be inaccessible or dangerous, not to mention the problems of mikvah water, lack of privacy. Jerusalem therefore necessitates the construction of mikvahs. And indeed, it's been done by Jews in every age. Lydia didn't have the advantage of a mikvah because she lived in a Roman town in a Greek nation, right? So they were out by the river. The rabbi probably told them it was okay. Mikvahs built in the ground or built an essential part of a building. Portable receptacles, whirlpools, jacuzzis never function as a mikvah. The mikvah must contain a minimum of 200 gallons, it's 40 seg, 200 gallons of rainwater that was gathered and siphoned into the mikvah pool in accordance with a highly specific set of regulations, right? It can't be a duct, it must be a log. Okay. In extreme cases, the acquisition of rainwater is impossible. Ice or snow originating from a natural source may be used to fill the mikvah. Rainwater, an intricate set of laws surrounds the transport and handling. Remember, it can't be drawn water. Now, it is interesting that a trough was okay for cleaning utensils. And they even made it bigger, right? The casuals will often only see one pool. This is really important. One used for immersion. In reality, most mikvahs are comprised of 2, sometimes 3 attached pools. Remember the picture I showed you? 3 attached pools? While accumulated rainwater is kept in a lower pool, the upper immersion pool is drained and refilled regularly with tap water, drawn water. Yep, it's drawn water. But it can be so much, right? Until that's the heave, right? The drawn water is a heave that allows, and what can you have? About 2/3 of it can be heave. The other third has to be rainwater, the regular water. Connected with a hole of at least 2 inches. You can't use the word duct. Don't use the word duct. In diameter, right? 2 inches. At least 2 inches. Remember, the trough wasn't big enough. The hole wasn't big enough. Bottom of the upper pool, free flow or kissing of waters between the pool makes the waters of the immersion pool an extension of the natural rainwater, thus conferring upon the immersion pool a legal status of a mikveh. An alternative method involves side-by-side pools which share a common wall that has a hole in it. This is the teruma, or this is the Talmud. Halasha stipulates that a person must be scrupulously clean before immersing. Modern-day pools are equipped with filtration and water purification systems. That's Shlomo. The thing is, okay, this is late. When was the Talmud finished? 1400. Many of these times they couldn't wash themselves completely. Anyway, we're running out of time. We'll finish up with a modern mikveh, and we'll get into the translation of John. The thing is, I want you to have, like I said, every time. I'm not trying to kill you with verbiage. I'm trying to get you a basis so that we can think just like John and Jesus, right? Just like the guys that are writing this. And it's really cool because you're just like John and Jesus to a degree. They were doing Greek and thinking Hebrew, kind of ish. You're thinking English, and we're trying to do Greek and Hebrew. So we're all even, right? Thank you, Father, for your word. Pray you look after us this week. In your name we pray. Amen.
Lionel, did you see the snow that they're moving our classroom?
Yeah.
Did you get an email?
Yeah.
It was stuck in the attendance folder, so I figured. It
Oh.
says they need us to move starting next week, May 29th. We need for you to move